I look at it not so much as a replacement for people as I look at it as an accelerator for people. Somebody once said it's like a bicycle for your mind.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Confessions of a B2B Marketer. Today we're joined by Alex Heublein, who is the president of Netsurit. Now, Alex is a bit of a legend in the AI game. And so in this interview, as part of me trying to learn about AI, I'm basically asking Alex about how he works with his clients and how he internally uses AI to optimize business processes, save costs, and grow revenue. And Alex delivers on this. So jump in and hopefully we give you some inspiration for how you can adopt AI in your business. Quickly before we jump in, my name's Tom. I'm the CEO of a company called Fame. We start and grow podcasts just like this. So if you would like a podcast just like this, go to fame.so, request a proposal. Let's jump into the discussion with Alex right now. This episode is sponsored by MailTrap, an email delivery platform designed for product companies. Go for high deliverability, growth-focused features, and industry-best analytics. Get 20% off for all plans with our promo code B2B Entrepreneur. Check the details in the description below. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
So there's a couple of things I want to cover in this session. The first is more about your role at Netsurit. And then the second is about how you see AI impacting both entrepreneurship and operations. But let's jump into your role. My first question is, how would you describe the president role?
Well, it's great. I run our innovation business. So I do a couple of things. One is, we take artificial intelligence, automation technologies, analytics capabilities to our customers, right? We sell this as a subscription service, right? So it's very different than sort of a traditional consulting type of arrangement. It's really about ongoing co-innovation with our customers. That's one aspect of my job. And then the other aspect of my job that's really interesting is taking those same principles, techniques, and technologies and using those internally to transform our business as well. So it's kind of flip sides of the same coin. A lot of times there's some overlap and cross-pollination between what we do for our customers. It's a fantastic role. It's a lot of fun to be able to go into organizations and work very closely with them as a partner to help them innovate, right? To help them transform their business and ultimately get it growing faster, producing great levels of efficiency and productivity gains. So yeah, it's a bit of a tale of two cities, but very, very similar ideas, both externally as well as internally within the company.
Interesting. And so would you say that's a typical president role in a business? Or because it sounds like it's almost like you have an internal consulting role and then you're also running a business line.
It is. And kind of the reason we combine we're bringing a lot of very unique technologies to the table, as well as business capabilities. So we looked at it and we said, you know what, let's run this as a business for our customers, but then let's also make sure we're doing the same types of things internally to improve our own business. So yeah, it's an interesting role. It's fairly unique in my experience, but great role to be a part of.
Yeah, it also gives you credibility when you go out to sell the service, right? You can be like, oh, we did this internally and it had this impact.
Exactly. And vice versa. Sometimes you have to sell these things internally as well. So as much as I'd like to say, no, everybody does exactly what we want them to do, but being able to also bring in and say, hey, we've done this out in the real world. We've done it for customers. Let's do something similar internally. We've proven out the model. We've proven out the technology. So it very much works very synergistically between customer engagements as well as our own internal engagements.
It also probably helps facilitate learning. Like you work with a client, do something awesome with AI, and then you can be like, okay, that would probably increase our business or grow our business. So you're like learning externally and then bringing it internal.
You got it.
Nice, very clever. So I think a big challenge, and we'll talk about the AI stuff later, but a big challenge of making any change inside a sizable company is getting people to buy in, especially with AI. It's such a polarizing topic. Do you have any tips to share that you've learned from your internal role implementing stuff like this in terms of the people side and getting people to engage and adopt what you're doing?
Yes, definitely. Well, so a couple of things we've learned. One is we use an ideation platform, both internally as well as externally with our customers. It's a platform called Bright Idea. And what it does is it lets us sort of crowdsource ideas for improvements. It lets anybody go in, submit ideas. We can vote on them. They can put in, here's what I think the business impact is going to be, et cetera. So that's the first thing is, don't try to do these things from a top down, it goes from the executive committee all the way down, because you typically don't get the same level of adoption as if you crowdsource things and people feel like they're part of them, right? So that's one of the first learnings, is make sure you do that. The second thing we do, and we do this in particular with our customers, is we don't just say, hey, what are your business problems, and we'll go solve them for you, right? We do a couple of things. One is we show them what's possible, because one of the biggest inhibitors in adopting new technology, so AI specifically, but this is true of almost every technology revolution, there's always resistance. There's always, and I think the resistance doesn't come so much from an explicit, I don't want to do this sort of thing. I think it's very much a fear of the unknown, a fear of, or lack of understanding for what's possible. So one of the first things we do is we go in and we just show people things. Here's what this can do. It may not even be related to their business, but invariably we go in there, we show them these things, we get them comfortable with the technologies and the concepts, and then we solicit ideas from them. Right. So instead of this being sort of a push it out to you type of model, it's much more of a, let's show you what's possible. And then you and we will all sit down and ideate together. And then the third thing we've learned is go in and actually talk to the people that are doing the work. You can talk to their managers, you can talk to the executives, and they think they know how things work. But often there's a disconnect between their perception of how things work at a detailed level versus the reality. So one of the things I love to go in and do is talk to the sort of individuals doing the work. And then the first question I ask them is like, what do you hate about your job? Like what are the things that you do that take up a lot of time? They don't necessarily add a lot of value. And if you could automate those things, you would be thrilled to automate them. So we kind of start out at that ground up level as well as the top down level. And if you can do it from both angles, I think your chances of getting buy-in and adoption are significantly better than if you start at one end or the other.
Yeah, I can tell you're an expert at this. Like that is masterly change management, bottom up and top down. And such a good question to ask anyone. Like, what do you hate about your job? You're like immediately putting yourself on their side almost, which you are, right? Because we're looking to improve their working life, etc. Because the result of that is that we get better business outcomes. Question, are you using AI in your day-to-day workflow?
Oh, yes, increasingly so. I mean, I was a very early adopter of AI. And in fact, I've been doing AI on and off in some way for 30 years, back from when it really couldn't do a whole lot to now where we're seeing it's tremendously effective. But yes, I use AI just in my day-to-day workflow every single day. It's fantastic. It improves my life as an individual, getting things done, doing things that would have taken me hours and hours and hours to do, I can do in minutes. It's been hugely, profoundly impactful to the way I do things.
Can you share an example of recently how you've done something, you were doing something and then you used AI and then it blew your mind?
Absolutely. So I just got back from a trade show. One of the industry verticals we focus on is the accounting and tax industry. And so we were at a trade show in Vegas with about 2,000 accountants. I know, it sounds like a super fun crowd. We had a lot of fun with them. They're not just bean counters. They're very, very sharp people and lots of ideas. So prior to the show, though, we had a list of about 40 accounting firms that we wanted to make contact with. They fit within our ideal customer profile. They were in the regions that we service within the US, very much aligned. So one of the things I did was I went to OpenAI, Deep Research, and Deep Research reports. So I had the list of companies and I had the list of the attendees that were going to be there from those companies. And so I simply, I wrote about a page-long prompt and said, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get information about them, both their companies as well as the individuals who are going to be attending the show. And I ran 40 of those deep research reports. And they take about, anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes to run. And then what I did, because I'm not going to read 1,000 pages of information, right? I don't have that kind of time to go read it. I then took the output of that and I put it into an application called Gamma. And what Gamma does is it builds incredibly sophisticated slide decks, right? So that instead of reading 20 pages of information, I'm now going through 20 slides, just looking for the high points, looking for the important things. That saved me just an enormous amount of time. And we spread those out to all the other members who were attending from Netsurit into the trade show. Here's the slides. Here's the 8 or 9 companies we want you to make contact with. Here's the profile. Here's the people. But the interesting thing, Tom, was that it didn't just come back with, yeah, okay, here's all the demographic or firmographic data on these people. It actually went in and looked at it from my perspective, which is what are their pain points? What are the challenges that they're facing? Very likely. Can you find anything about issues they've had in the past or opportunities or their perspective on things? And it came back and it gave us a great view of the types of conversations we needed to have with them. So, yes, we're going to make contact with them, but now here are some of their pain points. Here are some of the opportunities. Here's their perspective on different topics within both the accounting industry as well as within the technology aspect of their business. And that was incredibly valuable. It would have taken me a week to have gone out and done all this research. And it took me about 3 hours to run all the reports and generate all the slide decks. And then, I could look through them at my leisure. So that's a great example of something that saved a tremendous amount of time, but it probably also did a better job of researching them than I would have done with Google, right? Or doing it by hand, searching through their website, looking for news and press releases and things like that. I think it did a much more thorough job than a human would have done. And so 2 or 3 hours worth of work, and all of a sudden now I know exactly who I want to go after. I know their pain points. I know their history, the whole bit. So that's just a good example of one that I used just this week.
Epic. The interesting point here, I think, is how do you think he was able to understand the pain points? Was it like looking at all previous LinkedIn posts and looking at like company blog posts, etc.?
Looking at blog posts, looking at press releases, even things like public records on the company, right? So how many audits have they done of these types of customers or whatever, things that are actually in the public domain from a public and even governmental record standpoint. I went through and looked at that. It went through transcripts of podcasts some of them had done and said, hey, their CEO or their managing partner, he really cares about these 3 things based on this podcast transcript that I read. So it's quite thorough. It's, again, those are probably things I would have missed doing this as a human, as an individual researcher, that it came up with in less than 10 minutes. So very, very powerful. Not only does it automate something that I would have done manually a year ago or 2 years ago, but it also increased, I think, the depth and the level of breadth that we got out of those deep research reports. So it was amazing.
The other cool thing is if like you're speaking to one of the accountants, they're like, well, how did you know this stuff about me? You can explain. And then you're basically also advertising a bit about what you guys do, right? You're like sharing your expertise with AI.
Oh, no, we pulled out the laptop and said, here's how we know all this. You want to know how I found all of this out, right? So it was almost like a little demo of what can be done for an organization. Because, that's true of any sales organization. If you think about it, if you're going out doing B2B sales and you're going out prospecting, the ability to find out as much information as you can about both the company, their background, their history, their current state of affairs, their pain points, their opportunities, and the key individuals you need to be speaking with regarding those things. That's true of any sales organization, right? So this isn't something that's just specific to what we did. This is something that you could apply to virtually any organization out there that does B2B sales, as an example.
Okay, let's jump now into AI. And specifically, I would love your viewpoint on if you're starting a business today versus like 10 years ago, what do you think you should be doing differently because of AI?
So you're talking about sort of starting a company, embracing AI. AI can be, I look at it not so much as a replacement for people, as I look at it as an accelerator for people. It's like something somebody once said, it's like a bicycle for your mind. It improves your individual productivity to a point where you can get so much more done as a founder. Right? Because the problem with startups, the problem with starting companies is you're always highly resource constrained in the beginning, and you're always trying to do 10 different jobs. So using AI to accelerate those jobs, so whether it's prospecting for new customers, whether it's manipulating data, even helping you come up with ideas for products and services. Like we use AI actually to help us do that. We have the ideas, and then we use AI to help us flesh out those ideas, to really give us some perspective on them, to give us opinions on things like what verticals should we focus on? What size of customer based on this offering do you think this would be the most applicable to? So it doesn't replace sort of that human reasoning, but it does give you another set of insights that you may not be aware of. So I think researching the industry, the biggest problem that startups have in my mind is product market fit. If you look at startups, they end up, generally speaking, they'll pivot 2 or 3 times from their original idea into what's going to work in the market. So one of the areas that I think you can use AI for is helping to determine and then validate do you have the right product market fit for the products and services that you're bringing to market? And at least gives you another set of data points that you can use to determine, are we on the right track here, or do we need to pivot into something slightly different, an adjacent space that might be better suited to what we're trying to deliver to our customers?
Got it. So they can empower the founder to essentially be more productive.
Massively more productive.
Makes total sense. I know we shared the example of the prospecting for the accounting event for you guys using AI internally. I'd love to explore another example where you guys are using AI internally that's like cool or unusual.
So one of the things that we're in the process of implementing right now, if you think about our core business, we are a global IT managed service provider. So as part of that, that's the core of our business. And so if you think about that, we field a lot of support calls every day. We'll call in and say, there's something wrong with my printer, or the network isn't working, or whatever it happens to be, right? And a lot of times what we found is that the solutions to these problems that they run into are highly repeatable. We very rarely get this unique thing where we have to go spend hours and hours trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, we get those, but the bulk of what we get are things that are relatively easy to diagnose. They're relatively easy to solve, but today they take a human to go through that whole process, right? So one of the things we're implementing for our help desk individuals is the ability to use AI to go collect all the information we have about a particular customer and about a particular caller who's calling in, right? So for instance, I can bring up the last 5 tickets that this person has submitted. I can bring up a little background history from their LinkedIn profile to say, here's who this person is, here's their job function. Even here's a little blurb about the company, because our support agents may not know what type of company they are, because they're getting a call. They don't necessarily know what they do. So the ability to very quickly take that data from our ticketing system, from our knowledge management system, as well as from public sources, and even as they're speaking to them, this information is coming up and showing them, here's what this person cares about. Here's the last few tickets they've had. Looks like they have this printer problem about once a quarter, right? And then here's how we solve those problems. That ability to get that information very rapidly without having to go to a bunch of different systems and using AI to reason across the data, because some of the data is structured, some of the data is unstructured. So we're pulling documents as well as data that is in databases or systems all together in real time to give them that context that they need to better service the customer. So that's another example of something we're working on right now, to give that sort of institutional knowledge very rapidly to these people, so that they can develop that rapport as well. You know, when you're calling into tech support, wouldn't it be cool if somebody said, hey, Tom, great to see you. I know you're into this football club, or whatever it is. I know you've had this problem 3 times in the past. Being able to kind of create that more personal relationship. And I know that may sound strange, using AI to create more personalized relationships, but that's another example of an area that we're working on right now to really improve the level, not just the resolution time, but also strengthen the bonds with those customers when they do call in and give them a more personalized experience.
Got it. So we're essentially providing information to a service rep that they wouldn't have been able to get before. And it is coming both externally from the business and internally from the business. So then providing that to them in a digestible way at the right time so they can do their job better. Is that like a good summary?
Yes. And doing it in a way that's not intrusive, doing it in a way that doesn't take 10 minutes to go get the information, but something that we can give them in very close to real time so that they can have that conversation. They're not reading a novel about the customer and the company and their history. It's a short couple of paragraphs, but it gives them that ability to create much more highly interactive, highly personalized experiences, as well as getting the job done faster from an efficiency and productivity standpoint.
Interesting. So it could have an impact on costs, yet also could have an impact on revenue because we're making the clients, internal customers, happier with the IT managed service, and therefore that could increase renewals, etc.
Increases renewals, the stickiness with the customer. Also gives us the ability to sell more of our products and services into those organizations, right? The happier they are with what we're doing in this line of our business, the more willing they'll be to have a conversation with us about other services and products that we provide.
Absolutely. I'd love to talk about one more example, but this one, if possible, what I'm very interested in is like data that a business already has and owns internally that's proprietary to them that previously couldn't really be used until AI, but now can be. And it could be an example from a client or from internally that you could share.
So I'll give you a great client example of this, right? So if you think about accounting and tax firms, In the US in particular, April 15th is the tax filing deadline. I'm sure every country has one. That just happens to be the one here in the US. So the period between sort of mid-January and mid-April is a very difficult time for these organizations, right? They are running around trying to get all these tax returns done. They struggle getting information from different organizations. But one of the things most firms do is they'll publish a guide prior to tax season starting that kind of spells out, look, here's how we do things. Here are the changes in the tax code this year that you need to be aware of. Here are the internal accounting standards that we use to do these sorts of things, which can change a little bit from year to year, depending on the tax code changes, et cetera. So this can be a 250-page document. Now, how many people have time to read a 250-page document? Like no one, right? Writing a 250-page document is hard enough, but then you want to get all of your accountants and all of your tax people and all your partners to go read this thing, virtually impossible. So the ability to take that and reason across that data, it's completely unstructured, right? It's just in a big Word document. The ability to do that and then fine tune the large language models that we're using to be able to answer very specific questions about that document. So the junior people don't have to go ask the senior people and waste their time asking clarifications. They simply go to a chat bot. They say, what do I do about this? Or how do I treat this particular transaction or whatever? And it's already trained on the accounting standards that are used generally, but also trained on the specific rules and these specific guidelines that particular accounting firm uses. It's hugely beneficial. Saves everyone from having to read a 250-page document, much less remember all of the information. They have a simple chat bot they can pull up on their phone or in a window on their web browser, ask it questions, and then have it respond interactively to the queries that they're making. So that's another example of taking data that you have, but it's unstructured, it's hard to remember, it's hard to consume, and making it consumable in real time based on a specific request or a specific need that they have.
And yeah, again, it's probably going to impact costs and revenue because we're going to save the accountant's time because it can be summarized very easily. And then it's probably going to impact revenue positively because the accountants are ultimately going to be more compliant with the new rules, which is going to, in theory, produce better results for the customers and then impact renewals.
And get the returns done faster, right? Nobody wants to submit a late tax return. So yes, the ability to not only do that, but also speed up the process, get the result back to the customers more quickly from a sort of time to value standpoint, also potentially very beneficial.
Here's really what I think is like the key point from this discussion is any B2B entrepreneur listening, like where is the data that's inside your organization and outside your organization that can be given to people in your team at the right time to make them more efficient and ultimately make customers happy? I think that's the key.
It is. And part of the problem, Tom, is that, traditionally, we've tried to capture a lot of this data in very structured sources. But if you go look at most businesses, 70 to 80+% of their data is unstructured. It's in documents. It's in a SharePoint site. It's in some spreadsheet someone developed. It's not in this nice, neat relational database that you can go query and pull out the results, right? So the ability to access and reason across the structured data as well as all of this unstructured data, which again makes up the majority of the data in most organizations, that's a power we've just never had. We've had search engines that can maybe find keywords, but instead of looking for keywords, now what we do is we do something called semantic indexing. So instead of indexing like Google does with keywords or meta tags, now we're looking for meaning things. So it may not be the same word, but we might have used a word that means the same thing contextually. And so we can search for things and pull back information in a much, much more powerful context, right? It's not about getting the keywords right. It's about getting the ideas right. And then the semantic indexing figures out, okay, I know what you mean here. I know the types of things you're looking for from a semantic standpoint rather than just a syntactic standpoint. And that's hugely valuable.
There we go. Alex, we're going to link to Netsurit. Of course, we're going to link to your LinkedIn profile. Anything else we should link to or mention?
Yeah, well, just the fact that there are a couple of things we're seeing in the marketplace, right? One is there's still some concern about AI in the marketplace and a lot of these technologies. And I think one of the biggest concerns is privacy of data. So I want to make sure that when I'm using these large language models, when I'm using AI, that this very, very important information that I have that's proprietary doesn't leak out to the rest of the world. That's a big concern. That's probably our number one concern we get when we go talk to people is wow, we can't have that happening, right? So my first bit of advice is make sure you have a good partner that knows what they're doing. Don't try to do this yourself, right? If you're going to do it, make sure you've got someone who really knows what they're doing, helping you get this set up, helping you work with it initially. So that's sort of my first bit of advice. And so we do a lot of that. We do AI strategy engagements. We create policy documents. So here's how to use it internally effectively. And then the second one is related but different. There's a lot of cybersecurity risks in the small and medium business world, which is really the sort of market that we go after. Companies anywhere from, let's say, 20 to 25 employees all the way up to maybe 2,500 employees. What we're seeing in the market is that cyber criminals are coming down market. They're actually using AI to reduce the cost and effort they need to go through to hack these small and medium businesses, right? So when you look at AI, you have to look at it both from a potential standpoint. What can this do for my business? You need to look at it from a privacy standpoint to make sure your data is not inadvertently getting leaked to the wrong people. And then you also need to look at it from a cybersecurity standpoint. How do I secure this information? These models that have access to a lot of my data, how do I make sure I've got those locked down very tight? And again, that's not something I recommend that organizations try to do on their own. If your IT department is your cousin Vinny, let's get your cousin some help on how to do that and do it at scale and do it very professionally for you. So get a good partner, and I think you'll avoid a lot of the potential pitfalls that come with these emerging technologies.
There we go. Alec, thank you so much for coming on.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, what do we think of that? I think that the key point here is that there's data that sits internal and external to your business that can be used to make your team more effective. And AI is a tool to go and get that data and deliver it at the right time. So I love that from Alex. Thank you for Alex for coming on. All the things about Alex will be linked below. And then a quick shout out to Lizzie, who's a longtime listener of Confessions of a B2B Entrepreneur. I always find the content compelling and find myself thinking about it later in the day. Lots of good stuff here. Lizzie, thank you so much for that. Thanks to Alex again. Thanks to Fame for producing the show. And thanks to you for listening.